welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 97 for Monday, July 13th, 2020. My name is Jonny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is the inhabitant of the Nether, Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel!
That I am. And if you would like to hear this inhabitant of the Nether talk about things with Jonny, like getting new stuff and what to do with the new stuff, as well as streaming Minecraft and streaming other things on Twitch, then you should listen to The Render Distance. It's the pre-show conversation that Jonny and I have every week, and it is part of the extended version of the podcast. You can get it at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And speaking of Patreon, there's been so much excitement leading off this month in the first 2 weeks of the Nether update release, the Azuma Void interview last week, that we haven't had a chance to thank our now 190 patrons. That's incredible. You might notice the lack of advertising on this show, and that's because of you guys. It's because of the 190 people that support us financially. We can't thank you enough. It has allowed Jonny and I the opportunity to do this podcast and put the time in to make it a really quality show for you guys, and we really appreciate it, and we want to say thank you for all of that. Also, last week, record downloads for the Azuma interview. So welcome to all the new listeners. I hope you're enjoying the Spawn Chunks and hope you're going to be sticking around for a while because we're not stopping anytime soon.
And thanks again to Azuma for joining us and for doing his part in promoting the show. We got a shout out in Hermitcraft episode, which is pretty cool, but also, yeah, he's been sharing links to the show on Twitter and everything like that. We also got our first fan art on Twitter. I don't know if you spotted that, but that was a very cool thing to receive. Somebody drew us with, I think cups of coffee and microphones and stuff, and so that was very cool to see.
Yeah, it had the Spawn Chunks sound bar behind it. It had the logo. Yeah. I think I was streaming. I think I liked it because I didn't have time to reply. But yeah, no, it was very cool. It's nice. It's always nice to see that kind of stuff. I love inspiring new artists to do fan art, stuff like that. It's great.
Absolutely. We're going to keep today's quick login a little bit more brief because I think we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about our experiences with the 1.16 Nether update now that you've updated the Citadel, and this week I've been getting to grips with a Nether survival challenge in Bedrock Edition. But I want to talk a little bit more about that and how it has reframed my perspective on this update, because it's a really interesting way to play. So without getting too far in depth, what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
So I'll say on the technical side here, we'll get into the gameplay stuff later. We are on 1.16 on the server. Took a couple times to turn the chunks, but everything is looking and functioning well. We still run into some odd, really strange chunk borders, but it just gives you a little bit of fun landscaping to do with the Nether if you decide to tweak that. Or, as we discussed last week, sometimes servers have rules where you have to go out farther from the main area if you want to harvest a lot of these blocks and kind of destroy a new Nether biome. Well, you have a really good excuse when the new Nether biome has very hard 16 by 16 chunk borders. Mm-hmm. Feel free to mine away and soften that up a little bit. So I did a little bit of that. Got my hands full of some basalt and some blackstone that I'm planning for a future project that I'll talk about later in the show. I updated Optifine to Preview 2 and then Preview 3. Preview 4 was released July 11th. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Optifine.net for people that don't know. I'm finding Preview 2 operating better. And I don't know what the development process is for Optifine, but I tried Preview 3 on the weekend and I could only last a couple hours. I had to switch back to Preview 2. So it's not quite as helpful as I was hoping. The other thing I do find is that the less noisy the texture, the better for me in terms of what I'm doing. Tasks also matter. Things like bone mealing and collecting things in a very small area where you're moving your mouse around quickly in a frequent manner, not good.
Yeah.
Where slabbing the Nether, where it's mostly dark, even with Optifine offhand lighting from a torch in your offhand.
Dynamic lighting,
dynamic lighting. Even from dynamic lighting, it's still not that bright. So slabbing the Nether, not a problem, because I can't really see the detail for it to go fuzzy in the first place. The whole thing's just fuzzy even for regular people playing the game.
I was going to say, how happy are you that 1.14 changed the Netherrack texture to not look like TV static but red?
Oh my gosh.
I imagine that's kind of a huge difference at this point. I can imagine if you're one of those people who wanted to stick with the programmer arts, you'd probably be having a much harder time.
Yeah, no, and that's pretty much where I am with it. So I'm working on a big build. Actually, we spent the weekend retooling the functional aspects of the in Nether gold farm, and I say in Nether with a big asterisk next to it. Yes, my gold farm is not on the Nether ceiling because I think it looks cooler. I've answered this question about 1,000 times this week.
Yes,
Um,
I can confirm it looks cooler. I stopped in on one of your streams, and you have the entire thing kind of encased in a big glass box as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's based on the Nembomb donut farm that a lot of people do.
Hmm.
It's in a lava lake. It's in a very large lava lake to minimize the amount of spawn proofing that you have to do in the Nether. So it's not 256, but the lava lake takes care of a good 2/3 of how much space we'd have to slab otherwise.
Yeah.
Uh, as a result, though, the little glass bars that Nembomb puts at the top of his design to keep ghasts from spawning on the top level do nothing
Yeah.
in the Nether. You have to encase the thing in a giant glass cake dome to keep the ghasts out and also keep ghasts from elsewhere because they can still spawn above the lava
Yeah.
from shooting the platforms and destroying stuff. So it's a lot of glass, but it does look really cool because it's pink glass with the orange lava light glow happening all around it. So everything is lit from below.
Hmm.
It looks really cool. There's a couple of screenshots actually on Twitter this week that you can probably track down at twitter.com/Joel Duggan. But the fun parts of swapping out the platforms for magma blocks, nether brick slabbing the nether, and killing chamber adjustments, the technical stuff that I really enjoy about new updates. That's what we were working on this week. I'll get a little bit more into the aesthetic changes later, but that's essentially what we spent the week doing. So it was kind of nice to have big tasks, like it just fix the gold farm. Like that's all I did all week. And so every time I logged in, it was like placing several stacks of magma blocks or mining magma blocks, thanks to server mate Cosmic Dancer, who obviously mined a lot of those magma blocks and donated them to the community build. So stuff like that was really fun to kind of to work on and get into. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, I have been in Bedrock Edition this week, as I mentioned earlier, using an add-on that I found from a guy called Nether Ninja, who has a Nether spawn add-on for Bedrock Edition on Windows 10. I presume you could maybe load it into other versions of the game as well. I'm not quite sure how the add-on distribution model works, but effectively what it does is spawn you in the overworld like normal, but you're in a bedrock block that has a single 1x1 nether portal in it, so you're already standing in something that's going to teleport you into the nether. And then once you're there, it creates a spawning platform, kind of like the obsidian platform in the end, and in the center of that, if you've enabled it, is a bonus chest. And it's just like the bonus chest that you get in the overworld when you start a new world. It's got a couple of planks and maybe some tools and torches and stuff like that in it, but it's all materials that are relevant to the nether as well. So you're getting warped wood in there instead of, acacia or something like that. And it's a pretty neat way of starting you out because it avoids you having to go through the tool progression in the overworld to craft a portal to get yourself to the nether in the first place. And I thought I would do this just as a way of, for a start, doing a week's worth of Bedrock Edition videos, which is something that I promised the community I would do from our fundraising live stream recently. But also, it's kind of fun to show that the Bedrock game really isn't all that different from the Java game if you're playing through the intended way and not really engaging in any kind of technical play. So even though it's in Bedrock Edition, all of the stuff I'm doing is stuff that you would probably do in the same circumstances in Java Edition. And since I have no access to redstone because I can't go mining in the overworld, I'm not going to be automating anything anyway. So I'm playing almost like the intended experience, I feel like, of just what the Nether experience is right now. And it's given me some perspective on how the update is balanced, which I think is worth sharing in our main discussion topic. But speaking of balance, we have a couple of changes coming through in the news this week from Java Edition Snapshot 20W28A. There are a few changes in this one. The full changelog is on Minecraft.net, but the main ones are here, which includes brewing stands now being able to be crafted with blackstone. Villagers now emit green particles when joining a village, setting a home bed, or acquiring a job site/profession. Totems of Undying now give fire resistance for 40 seconds when activated, and bartering loot has been tweaked. We will get onto that in just a second. There are a couple of technical changes, including custom worlds now having support for custom biomes and not just custom dimensions, and dedicated servers now being able to rate limit clients. Again, more explanation of that on Minecraft.net because I have no idea what that means. Moving on to the bartering tweaks, though, this has been covered by a few folks on YouTube if you want a more visual explanation of this. But basically, what it boils down to is Blackstone and Spectral Arrows are now common trades from Piglin bartering. You get 8 to 16 Blackstone per gold ingot thrown. You get 6 to 12 Spectral Arrows per trade in the same sense. Water bottles have been added too, but are a little bit more rare, somewhere around the region of, getting water bottles maybe like 2 or 3% of the time, similar to how ender pearls and iron nuggets and stuff like that are. Ender pearls have also been made more rare. Magma cream and glowstone dust are no longer part of Piglin bartering at all, so you still have to get those from elsewhere. And some item amounts have been adjusted and mostly reduced, so you're getting less of the stuff thrown by the piglins when bartering takes place. We'll talk about exactly what that means in a minute, but there are a couple of other important news topics that I thought we would share here, one of which is Minecraft ending support for certain older mobile devices. Once again, a full statement about this, including all of the details, is on Minecraft.net, but to ensure that we can devote our resources to the platforms where the most crafters are playing, is what the blog post says, we are ending support for certain older devices and platforms where Minecraft is available. Effective in October 2020, Minecraft will no longer be updated or supported on Gear VR, Windows 10 Mobile, Android devices with less than 768 megabytes of RAM, iOS devices running iOS 10 or below, or video cards that only support DirectX 10.1 or below. Minecraft is still going to be playable on these devices, single-player worlds will still run, marketplace purchases will still be valid, but future updates may not be supported, and services like Realms may no longer be accessible. To break that down a little bit for you, Gear VR and Windows 10 mobile devices are going to lose multiplayer and Realms access in October 2020, simply because I think it's not worth their time to continue updating these and make sure that, all of the technical adjustments need to be made for these older platforms. Also, players with older Android and iOS devices will be able to continue to use their existing Realms, but if their Realm is updated by another device, like a Windows 10 PC that's running the latest version of Minecraft, the older devices will no longer have access to that realm because they won't receive the most recent updates. Marketplace purchases and realm subscriptions can be migrated to another platform if that's accessible to you. So if you're playing on an older tablet but you now have a Windows 10 PC, you can migrate your realm subscription to that and keep playing on that. And if you just want a refund because you're no longer going to be able to play Minecraft on Realms, there are links on that blog post of how you can apply for a refund for your Realm subscription if you feel like you need to. On a slightly lighter note, Minecraft Dungeons is getting its own novel. The full interview with the author, Matt Forbeck, is on Minecraft.net, and the novel is called Minecraft Dungeons Rise of the Arch-Illager. It's kind of a prequel novel of sorts, from what I can tell, kind of detailing the events of the intro cinematic, kind of leading up to when the Arch-Illager rises to power and the events of Minecraft Dungeons begin. Matt Forbeck's other writing credits include novelizations set in the Halo, Guild Wars, and Dungeons & Dragons universes, so he clearly has a pretty hefty pedigree here. He's coming in with a good CV of like a lot of previous video game adaptations and like nerdy game adaptations that he's written novelizations of, so it's quite promising, and it seems like he has a pretty good understanding of what Minecraft Dungeons is and how that relates to the broader world of Minecraft.
So the Rise of the Arch-Illager is not really on my short reading list, but I did like this quote from the interview with Forbeck, and that is, "I didn't want to just tell the story because as a player, you're telling your own story, and that's half the fun of playing Minecraft Dungeons. If I tell the story in a novel, it becomes a canon version, and nobody wants to be told they're playing the game wrong." So while I'm not always a fan of prequels, it's like he's fleshing out the backstory of Minecraft Dungeons, it sounds like.
Yes, and it's very good that he's not trying to tread on the toes of anybody who is trying to carve their own story out of the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very kind of wise way of looking at it. And I think it's really interesting that this follows on from Max Brooks writing Minecraft The Island, and I think there is at least one other official Minecraft novelization, although I forget who it is by. But they do seem to be picking their authors well, from what I can see, and this guy seems to have a very solid knowledge of exactly what it is that makes Minecraft, and he's not coming at it from an outside perspective where he hasn't played the game before. He's clearly kind of familiar with dungeons as a concept. So yeah, I think it's very cool that they picked somebody who's on a level. And yeah, I like you, I'm not the target audience for this necessarily, but like 10 to 14-year-old me would absolutely have eaten this up. I still have several Magic the Gathering tie-in novelizations somewhere in boxes probably. But those novels can land on the side of cheesy, but will be really good reading for especially for kids who want more of the Minecraft Dungeons world, but are limited in the amount of screen time they can have. So if their parents don't want them playing Minecraft Dungeons all day long, then they can continue to be excited about that world by, having the novel around, so they can dip into a book every now and again.
And having books tied to things that are Minecraft related, encouraging younger players to read is always a good thing. Like, I'm always going to be on board for that.
Definitely. So let's briefly unpack the snapshot a little bit. I really feel like custom biomes is the big headline here, right? It's going to be really interesting to me how much use they will see in Vanilla Plus servers going forward. And for me, it'd be really interesting to see if the next season of like Hermitcraft or Legacy or one of the sort of larger YouTube SMPs ends up utilizing custom biomes and dimensions for various things, because I don't know how much strain it's going to put on multiplayer servers, but you're also looking at the ability to add a mining dimension for people who want to harvest a ton of resources, or maybe even like a dimension which is an on-platform creative world. Like, you go there through a portal, the game instantly switches you to creative, you can build whatever you want there, you go back through that portal, it switches you back to survival. It's like having bungee cord on one server, ultimately, which could be a really interesting prospect if it works from a technical perspective.
Yeah, and if for things like big collaborative builds like we talked about last week with Izuma, Nether hubs, like big things that require input from a lot of people, having a server-side dimension for creative collaboration and planning would be really helpful, I think. Probably a big time saver. I would imagine, as you mentioned, the first uses we'll see of this will be from a technical side, which is mining dimensions. It's just another version of the overworld, maybe with larger biomes, and or smaller, I guess, maybe in case things need to be faster to be found. But then basically, rather than having to go 1,000 or 2,000 blocks out in your existing world to mine so that you're not disrupting anybody's view, if you're going out in this mining world where it is understood that one, it resets once a month or something, and two, just destroy it. Like, just no one cares. It's just food, and I think that might help with a lot of the planning that goes into some of these larger, busier servers, because I know that in sometimes when they're looking for seeds, they're looking for like, well, here's a nice desert, but do we have a really big desert? Yeah. Because we're going to need to just destroy it for glass, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's worth looking at the alternate dimensions for. From a creative standpoint, though, I mean, I have no idea what they could end up being used for. The thing that kind of sticks in my mind is sometimes you might have an SMP that has more thematic stuff going on. Like, maybe it's a bit more medieval, or maybe everybody's building really aesthetic builds, but you log in one day and you want to build a giant mushroom for Mario, or you want to do, what was it, 2-3 seasons ago that Mumbo did like the giant Shrek art?
Yeah.
It was like 100.
Season 3,
it was huge.
I think. Yeah,
it was massive. So stuff like that it's fun, but it doesn't necessarily complement a beautiful build right next to it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, having like a fun zone or a anything goes, or a gaming district where you could change, some of the ways that Minecraft works to better, manipulate things.
Have a gaming dimension now. Why not?
Yeah.
The world is your oyster in this point. And I think some of the cooler stuff I've seen from it so far, because right now it's just people poking around and tweaking various things, but it's custom skies for certain things, where the sky can be a completely different color in this new dimension that you're making. You can have, a green or pink sky if you want to. And we see bits and pieces of that stuff creeping in with the Nether update, with the different colored biome fog and everything. But now, exactly, like having so many variations that you can apply to these new dimensions without the need to radically change the overworld or either of the other two existing dimensions to do that, I feel like there is some very fun stuff to be had here. I'm wondering if the custom biome support extends as far as being able to modify grass color and leaf color. If I could actually have a cherry blossom forest somewhere in the world without radically modifying vanilla gameplay and adding in biomes aplenty or something like that. This is effectively, you're looking at something like implementing biomes aplenty, but through vanilla and through these custom biome data packs now. Could be a really interesting time.
With the right data pack, you could probably get into that biomes aplenty or something like open terrain generator.
OTG, yeah.
OTG, like something like that with the biome bundle that they had.
Yes.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, that's the one.
But where it looks a lot like traditional like Earth mountains and valleys and rivers and things like that. That's something that I've always been on the fence about. Like if I was ever going to try modded, I would want to go with a mod pack that would allow me to have really picturesque stuff, because I'd be sacrificing a lot of other gameplay mechanics because mods are usually so far behind. But I'm waiting to see whether that kind of stuff comes out where you can get a dimension. And what's nice about the custom worlds is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we don't know the answer to this, but if I wanted to add a custom dimension to the Citadel, I don't think I would have to sacrifice any of the existing Citadel content, right? Like I think I would just be adding to it as opposed to having to have a new world.
Yeah. In theory, you just have to implement a way of getting to that dimension, like set up a command block or a data pack that teleports the player there. But it would exist effectively. Effectively, you have a separate folder for it in much the same way as the End and the Nether are separate dimension folders.
Okay, that's what I'm anticipating from a behind the scenes. You'd have a different region folder for this new dimension.
Yeah.
I do that right now. We have custom command blocks on the server that teleport you to our various build zones, like the medieval area and the modern city area and Dartmouth Meadows. Like we've got teleport blocks that just save us the trouble of the travel, just because we're a busy adult server and stuff like that. And I mean, adding something in like that just takes you to a different dimension, or if the data pack allows you to do what looks like another portal, but maybe it's green or blue or some other color, I think that would be really cool too.
Yeah, definitely. Other stuff in the snapshot, we'll just run through this quickly. Totems granting fire resistance and villagers emitting particles when pairing with points of interest. These are both bedrock features that really deserve to be in Java too, and it's good to see them in this update. When I was playing Bedrock to do my week of the achievement guide that I did, where I was spending an entire week in Bedrock Edition previously, villagers did already tie themselves to points of interest by having those green happy particles that they emit whenever you've traded with them and they've gone up a level. It makes perfect sense that they do that in Java Edition in the snapshot. Very good change, and will add a lot of clarity, especially now that villagers pairing with workstations has been changed, so it gives priority to the most experienced villager. So some people have been seeing a little bit of confusion for that when they put a workstation in front of the nearest villager, but the more experienced guy who's already got that profession claims it, and that's kind of been confusing some folks. So that's good. And totems giving fire resistance with more people spending time in the Nether, dying in lava possibly. Like, it makes a lot of sense that you use a totem of undying and you don't die. And that's kind of a good change as well. It still won't save you from the void, obviously, but it is definitely going to be limiting the amount of circumstances in which players can hold something that is effectively supposed to rescue them from death and not die, which is, it's a very good thing. Last thing is bartering tweaks.
Yeah, how do you feel about these bartering tweaks? I don't think the changes are really going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference.
Not really. It's like Azuma was saying last week. You change the amount they're going to trade, people just AFK for longer or add more piglins. The fact that they aren't trading magma cream and glowstone dust, I think, is good. Because there are still other ways to get those. I think maybe those were there for people who are playing in peaceful, but I don't recall if piglins were really in peaceful mode to begin with, because they act hostile to the player most of the time anyway.
Right.
But then, glowstone dust, you can still harvest glowstone from the Nether. You can still get it from witch farms if you want it from there. And magma cream can still be found in Bastion loot chests, so it's not like it disappears from the Piglin Oeuvre entirely, but it is no longer a traded item, and that's good because you have umpteen other ways of getting magma cream in the Nether now, with basalt deltas spawning magma cubes, with magma cube spawners being in treasure room bastions. It makes a lot of sense to effectively give the players a reason to go out and get that instead of just setting up a Piglin bartering farm and calling it a day.
Yeah, I think my issue with that was that in my initial playthrough of 116, when I was doing that Nether rush and got into the Nether with very, very little, I was looking to get fire resist potions as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought was cool was when I put a gold ingot on the ground, the way that bartering with the piglin is intended, I ended up with some magma cream. And I thought that was good. Like, I thought that was very helpful. I thought that was a neat mechanic. But that's on a one-on-one early game basis. It's not this end game push. So I can understand why they would want to remove the magma cream, but I think maybe for stuff like that, they might want to just reduce it drastically to the point where it's really rare and exciting to get, as opposed to just removing it completely. Because I did find it. I mean, I did not end up finding another fortress to build a brewing stand or a village to build a brewing stand. So I never did get those fire resist potions. But had I had a village nearby, it would have been a game changer and a lot more fun early on. So removing it entirely, I'm not so sure. Spectral arrows? What do we care? Why do we want those? We already can get arrows from skeleton farms. Like, I don't need spectral ones.
I think the problem is that spectral arrows just fell off the radar when they were introduced because there is nothing in game that really prompts you to make them. And so I think maybe it's an incentive for players to realize those are in the game in kind of the same way that we discussed the Wandering Trader is there so that people know that coral reefs exist, you know? I think it's one of those things where, because there is glowstone in the Nether, it makes sense for them to have spectral arrows, because that's how you craft them.
All the Nether-related stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like they're kind of ticking all the boxes for all of the stuff that it is logical for people to create in the Nether if they've just been surviving in that dimension for a long time. So it sort of makes sense that way. Yeah, item amounts being adjusted doesn't really make a whole lot of difference in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, like you were saying, I think the whole point of bartering, it's been balanced for an early game experience, but not balanced at all for a late game experience, for farming, for automation. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in the discussion, because bartering is now the way I have to get some of the tools I need to get for this like Nether tool progression that I'm working on in my Bedrock Edition playthrough. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that affects players at different areas of the game. And I still think, despite how vocal they are and despite how popular YouTube series about this are, technical players are probably still in the minority when it comes to Minecraft players as a whole. You know, the amount of people who actually want to automate piglin bartering is probably going to be minimal next to the people who are just playing casually and want to run in and right-click on a piglin with some gold and just get some stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, it feels different to us because out of the 6 to 12 YouTubers that we watch on the regular, all of them are making piglin bartering farms, but like that's very small. It's a small demographic.
Yes, and that is something that we still deserve more complexity of mechanics, I think, to allow for players like that to be included, in much the same way that, you know, the PvP Minecraft community is still probably a minority, but they're still trying to adapt mechanics so that everyone's happy. I think it's good to keep this discussion open so that we can continue to, you know, figure out how the game can be made better to the benefit of everyone. And yeah, I think that's something we can get into again a little bit later. Last thing I want to touch on from the news is old device support, because we brought this up, and yeah, I think for some people, obviously, this is going to be a bit of a shame, especially people for whom you know, you aren't able to upgrade your device just yet. But it's not like the game is going to be deleted in its entirety. You're still definitely going to be able to play single player on whatever device you have Minecraft. It's not going to delete the game from your device or tell you that you can't play anymore. But of course, for some people, they're going to be losing access to multiplayer and realms, which is always a bit of a shame. I think it is harder to sunset a mobile app than a console version. Because obviously we had discontinued support for legacy versions like Xbox 360, PS3, Nintendo 3DS. All of those went away a while ago, and those are all the same hardware for everybody, more or less, right? Whereas it's so difficult to specify. We're taking away Minecraft's multiplayer support for Android devices with less than a gigabyte of RAM, or less than 750 megabytes of RAM, and you can't talk about that concisely. So maybe to some people it feels like, oh, Android support is going away, when actually it's Android support for 5 to 8 year old devices or older at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the age of the device, because I can't speak to the Android stuff, but in terms of an iOS device that's near the cap of the capability, it's from 2012. So if you're still playing Minecraft on an 8-year-old device, I kind of tip my hat to you. That
yes,
that can't be a quick experience.
And tip my hat to Minecraft for sustaining it for so long as well.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been many concessions made for mobile users, especially when it comes to the graphical output of certain things, like the flattening of bubble column textures when those came out, because certain mobile devices wouldn't be able to support that level of particle effects happening at once. And they've provided graphics options for older devices for as long as they feasibly can. But I think it just seemed like the time when the game is maturing to the extent that these devices will no longer really be able to support what Minecraft is trying to do.
And Minecraft is already pretty fragmented for a game of its popularity.
Yes,
and I think they're just by rolling forward with new tech and trying to keep things, they're probably trying to keep the fragmentation to a minimum.
Yes, yeah, and ultimately that's what it comes down to, is just having to support more and more things just because of, a legacy of having supported those devices. It reminds me a little bit of when I was working for Disney, and I was working on Disney Infinity, just providing email support for it. And Disney Infinity 2 was slated for release, and it wasn't going to be on the Nintendo Wii. And we got a few emails from people saying, well, that sucks, because the first one was on the Wii, and you sort of said this is going to be an evolving platform and it's going to keep going forward and forward and forwards. Why is it not going to be on the Wii? And we said, well, the Wii is a 10-year-old console at this point, and it is one of the most popular family consoles ever, so we can understand why people are being a little bit disappointed by this. But the Wii version of Disney Infinity 1 was already a way stripped-down experience compared to how it was on Xbox 360 and the other more modern consoles that had better graphics capabilities, higher processing power, HD graphics. And, at a certain point, you do have to leave that stuff behind, which is a shame, because for some people, that is their gaming experience. That is what they have to play those games. But yeah, it's a shame ultimately, but I think it is going to mean that the further development of the game is going to be less inhibited going forward by having to support older devices, which is just the reality of the situation and technology moving on.
Moving on into chunk mail, we've got a message this week from Freaky. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawn@chunkmail@gmail.com. Say that again, spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We've had some people asking recently in the Discord and on Twitter what the email address is. Freaky said, renewable Blackstone. Hey, Jonny and Joel. I just got the idea for how we could have renewable Blackstone. Since the piglins are kind of like villagers of the Nether, maybe they could get their own golem. A Blackstone golem that drops Blackstone when it dies. It could spawn when there's a bunch of piglins seeing a zombified piglin, or they could spawn in the bastions. Thanks, Freaky. Well, I think Mojang solved your problem for you by adding Blackstone to the piglin bartering system this week. However, I did think that the idea of a piglin version of a golem was really interesting. Jonny, what do you think of a golem in the Nether update? Like, what do you think that would look like?
I like the idea. I've been in favor of adding more golem-type mobs to the game for a while. And there does come a time when it's, like, the golems are typically meant to be player-created in the same way that, like, snow golems and iron golems can be. Villagers make iron golems themselves as well, but I think maybe that classification of mob is not quite the right thing to file it under. But then again, I do like the idea of there being a piglin equivalent, considering that they are, like you say, Nether villagers. Having them spawn when piglins see a zombified piglin seems kind of strange, because those groups of mobs spawn so close to each other so frequently, there would just be all-out war across the entire Nether between the regular piglins and the zombie piglins. So, considering that the zombie piglins don't even attack the regular piglins to begin with, I feel like it's not quite the right way to implement that. But I do like the idea, and I think it's even adding something more inventive to it like this seems better as a solution to me than just adding Blackstone to Piglin bartering, because that feels, if not like a low effort response to it, then it at least feels like, it could have been Blackstone that generated using what is a basalt generator. And that would make sense because of the way cobblestone generation works in the overworld, providing cobblestone, and Blackstone is effectively the Nether's equivalent of cobblestone in terms of the stuff that you can make with it. So there's a lot of things that could have been just rejigged a little bit and moved one space to the right, and then it would make a little bit more sense in terms of the consistency of mechanics for the overworld versus the Nether. I would like to have seen something a little bit different on that score rather than them just adding it to Piglin bartering. It is nice that we get renewable Blackstone now, of course, but still, I've been getting enough of it from mining out sections of the Nether underneath the lava lakes to get ancient debris that I have enough Blackstone to begin with. I like the idea of a new mob, though. And a gold golem seems like a fun concept as well, considering that there are, the amount of gold blocks and stuff that you find in Piglin bastions. It's almost like as though the villagers have been hoarding iron blocks to turn into iron golems. You can imagine the Piglins doing something kind of similar.
Yeah, I wonder if you could make instead of a golden golem, maybe you could build like a golden hoglin or a golden pig or something.
Have you seen the statues? These little like hoglin statues that are in some of the, I think they're the bridge type of bastions.
I haven't seen them yet.
There is a platform, there's a sort of corridor that spawns on some of them, which has a statue made of, I think, about 10 gold blocks, and it's got 2 quartz slabs at odd angles, so they look kind of like tusks on the front of a pig. And I think of it as a hoglin statue, even though it's probably meant to be a piglin, but it's sort of like the lower half of the head, almost like a sort of semi-decapitated piglin bust. And obviously they get mad at you for breaking it, but it's like 10 gold blocks, so you have to break it. And those are pretty fun, and I almost imagine those being like, some sort of either monument or attempt to make like a golden calf kind of style thing. That looks kind of interesting to me.
Typo in our live chat, which we do on our Discord because of the amazing support from our patrons, mentioned that the golem, or I guess Blackstone golem, would be maybe related to the dungeon's redstone golem. So same idea. So what about a Blackstone golem not being like an iron golem, but like a boss? Like what if Blackstone golems or Blackstone beasts or something were things that you had to fight in bastions, which is I think something that Freaky also mentioned too. That could be kind of interesting. Rather than just having piglin brutes, what if piglin brutes were made of Blackstone? Like what if they were rock pigs? Like,
I'm now thinking of, I think it was Thor: The Dark World or something like that, where one of the dark elves turns himself into like a more kind of iron plated kind of.
I watched
like
that last week.
Dude.
You are correct.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
It's one of the lesser liked Thor movies, I think, but yeah, it has that
better
very
than
kind of.
It's better than I remember. But they use the ether. He uses a little ether empowered stone. So it's an infinity stone powered piece of like black obsidian that he crushes in his hand, and it turns him into this crazy monster.
The obsidian connection is there right away. And I think stuff like that would be fun. I don't know if it constitutes a renewable source of Blackstone in the same way that we're asking. If it's going to be a boss mob that you fight to get Blackstone, I'm going to stick to mining the stuff. Thank you. But, But I do like the idea. I like the idea of diversifying the range of ways we can get materials. And I still think there is some stuff that needs to be done with bartering. I still like the idea of making bartering item specific, so you end up giving a piglin a gold chest plate, and that's the only thing they will trade for a specific item in their inventory. Diversifying the input to get the same diversity of output seems like something that is worth doing for the sake of balance, because then you can still be up in the Nether your first time there trading, ingots, nuggets, gold carrots, throwing out whatever you can craft to get whatever you can in exchange. And maybe, if you're trading specific things and you're getting the same stuff all the time, maybe that's a little bit unbalanced in certain other aspects, but I do think it's better than automating it using your zombie pigman gold farm and just churning through gold nuggets all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So, for our discussion topic this week, as we've been hinting at throughout the rest of the show, I thought we could talk about our new perspectives on the Nether update, because you've now moved to playing it in multiplayer on the Citadel, where previously I think you'd mainly been exploring it in a single-player world for the first time before updating, and I'm now playing in Bedrock Edition doing this Nether survival challenge, where I've been plopped into the Nether with absolutely nothing and attempting to do a Nether survival run, working my way from wood tools throughout the week all the way up to netherite tools, hopefully, if I can find some diamonds, which is looking like the bottleneck at this point. But I wanted to talk about how the continuation of gameplay into what I think of as like our primary ways of playing, maybe, has changed our perspectives on the update from where we were a couple of weeks ago, where we were looking at it in creative mode and thinking, what are we going to do with all of this? So how's the experience of moving the Citadel to 1.16 been for you, and maybe for the other players, if you've got some anecdotes from them?
I know that MacCast, one of my server mates, found a bastion with a magma spawner in it, and he ended up destroying it, and because he found it too challenging. Between the piglins, there's no brutes in the version yet, but between the piglins and the constant magma cubes, he was having a lot of trouble, and so he found that challenging. I don't seem to recall any complaints. It was more like, wow, this is hard, not so much, oh god, this sucks, you know.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's been a very different experience, going into a world that I know very very well after 3 years on the server, and discovering new nether biomes is exciting, which doesn't happen that often because, of course, because I'm the admin and I trimmed the chunks, I kind of know where it all is anyway.
Yeah.
In terms of the first ones, I know where the first forests are, I know where the first deltas are, etc. However, when you are underground and you can't see where you're going, or if you are going to an area where you have not explored yet, like I'm very curious to see something that we have not done in any of the new build zones. We haven't gone to the nether in, say, like the medieval area because we've been waiting. Why load that nether when we can just wait and have all new, brand new stuff? So I have no idea what the nether spawn is going to be like in the medieval district. So stuff like that is exciting. I find discovering the new biomes in a world that you know so well is cool because it brings this new life to what's just around the corner, or what used to be around the corner and is now something completely different. The new ambient sounds and new block sounds, nether bricks, bone blocks, netherrack. Can't say I'm in love with the netherrack mining sound. I don't mind the sound change on the walking on it, but it has that high-pitched kind of like crackle that mining grass does that gets to me when you're mining thousands of it. But everything else, quartz, hyphae, like all the different, like they have some, the hyphae have like a squeak to them when you mine them. It feels very organic.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like you are squashing a mushroom between your fingers or something like that. That kind of like almost rubbery sound to it. There is
a rubbery sound to it. Basalt also has a very unique sound. It doesn't sound like a plant, but it feels more like a fibrous mineral. If
it's
that
crunchy.
Makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has like a, I don't know if you've ever come across any kind of minerals in any kind of school activity or even out adventuring in the world, but some minerals, even though they're technically rocks, when you break them apart, they kind of have like long fibers in them, and they have this weird crackle to them. And so I really have enjoyed that kind of stuff. I also find that the amount of resources you can get quite quickly, a really good experience. Nylium, hyphae, sprouts, fungus with bone meal, like you need a couple of blocks to bring back to the overworld and some bone meal, and you're basically set, with nether wart blocks, all kinds of things that you can get. With basalt, obviously there's the basalt generators. Blackstone, as you mentioned, is easy to get. If you're mining just through anywhere, you'll eventually hit some. I find gold and quartz also more abundant. It could be just me, but I find I'm running into a lot more nether quartz and a lot more, well, obviously gold is brand new, but you can get quite a lot just by clearing out some netherrack and just seeing what you find. I'm finding that pretty good as well. And of course, soul, soil, and sand. As soon as you find a soul sand valley, you're set. Like you can get a couple of stacks probably without changing the landscape very much.
Yeah.
Like there's an awful lot of stuff that you can get quite quickly. So if you want to kind of like build out a quick nether palette and see what these new blocks are all about and try to find your way, it doesn't take hours to get up to speed. It only takes like 20 minutes, which I think is provided that you can find the biomes. If you know where the biomes are, then I think you're good. I'm discovering that I like polished basalt and basalt a lot more than I thought I would. Still has a limited use because the polished one has a log-like texture to it instead of stone.
Yeah.
Um, but I do still like both, and I like that they're directional, and so because it gives you a little bit more flexibility to it. I
Yes. Yeah,
think I
definitely.
might have said that I didn't like the directionality of it before on the podcast, so I might be changing my tune on that, but that's fine. You know, like having played with it and having trying to build it and use it in other ways. I think basalt pillars look cool. I don't know yet how to decorate them, but just the idea of like a 2x2 or a 3x3 basalt pillar in a build looks pretty old and pretty solid at the same time. Like it gives like this feeling of structure to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
I
So
have I have thoughts about how to use basalt and blackstone now that are way different to what I expected both of them to be used for, and it's interesting to me the way that has worked out because I was thinking of what I wanted from black blocks to begin with when Blackstone was first implemented. I was thinking, great, I have something I can use as like asphalt for roads, and now I'm finding so much more that the basalt is something I want to use for roads, and the blackstone is not because the top texture of basalt in its raw form works so much better with cobblestone, so you can add some detail to cobblestone paths that way, and it just looks like a slightly darker variant. It even tiles quite well next to it. The textures sort of line up quite nicely. And then Blackstone is just too noisy to look at in a path. I'm finding Blackstone works better for walls and roofs than Basalt does because Basalt has darker areas on either side of the block that if you end up placing a large flat wall of it together, the repetition of it starts to become really obvious. And it has kind of like lines in it in the same way that if you put a bunch of bone blocks together, you find those darker areas tend to merge and it goes dark, light, and looks kind of stripy. So I think
stripped logs have the same thing.
exactly. And so I think basalt looks way better as individual pillars, like you were saying, like a 1x1 or 2x2 pillar is going to look a lot better for basalt than a flat wall of the stuff. And that's where I think Blackstone works for a background. And then if you can put some materials in front of that to reduce the noise of the Blackstone wall being there, or use it as a roofing material so it looks more like kind of slate or something like that, it can look a lot better. But I'm not using it for roads at all because I don't like the way that texture works out for roads.
Yeah.
So I've kind of flipped on my head what I thought the original like uses for either of those blocks was going to be, and now I'm thinking the opposite of both of them and having a much better time with it now I'm using them.
Blackstone for me is still a no. I still don't like it. I'm not sure why so many people seem to be raving about it. I think they're just excited to have an actual quote unquote black block, even though if you put it next to black blocks, it's still pretty purple.
Mm-hmm.
I am still going to build with it though, so I'm not just barking at the moon. Um, I'm planning on building a netherite hall. We have a long way to go, about 96 blocks from our world center in the Nether, before we start to hit new mineable biomes chunks where
Mm-hmm.
netherite will actually, or ancient debris will actually spawn.
Yeah.
So rather than building branch mines and all that kind of stuff and going forever into nothing, I thought, well, it's going to be better to remove a whole lot of this stuff. And if we're removing a large chunk, we'll know right away when we get into a new biome because you'll start to see gold in netherrack. You'll start to see blackstone, that sort of thing. So I thought, well, it would also be a really good test of the blackstone to build a netherite blackstone hall. Not that it's going to be made of netherite, but it's like it's the location on our server to be organized, potentially have a piglin bartering set up, and also be able to know this is where you go when you want to start your mining adventure for ancient debris so that you know where people have gone and where people have not gone. And that way it's not a giant mess of just tunnels everywhere underneath the nether and people stumbling into holes and all kinds of problems. Or going to mine something, realizing you've been one block away from somewhere that's been cleared out by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So this way it's all going to be the same, similar to how we started our mine on the server way back in 2017, the overworld mine. So I do want to attempt to use it, but like you, I'm anticipating it being that backdrop block. So in a wall that's got maybe 2 to 3 blocks of depth, I would imagine the blackstone is going to be the back one. And then
Yeah.
anything in the front is going to be maybe basalt. I might try to work in some hyphae, some different color blocks. I'm toying with some lava features. I'm not really sure. But like, I kind of want it to look like this deep, dark underground thing. And having a black block that I don't have to smelt or craft from concrete powder is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Because working with concrete in the Nether, as much as I like it, you can't even make it in the Nether. You have to go to the overworld to make it. Um, so I'm going to give it a go, and I've got a funny feeling it's going to be a background block for it. But,
yeah, I think despite its abundance, I think Blackstone is really going to be one of those blocks to use very sparingly. It's going to be for texturizing stuff and to use like in a very limited way. Either that, or you stay in the Nether, and the majority of people I've seen who've really gone ham with the Blackstone are building Nether bases, so it makes sense. But then you have folks building stuff out of Blackstone and gold together, and all of that stuff being a very contrasty color scheme, it sort of works quite well. But that's being built in the Nether, surrounded by red fog, and it sort of mutes the color of it. Whereas when it's in full sunlight in the overworld, I feel like it just doesn't seem to sit as well for me without other blocks around it to dress it up a little bit more.
No, I agree. I've seen other YouTubers build things out of Blackstone where I'm like, that actually looks pretty good. But then you realize it's because it's in the Nether. It's a small build. Like, it's just, out of curiosity, I don't have the screenshot handy, but you talked a couple of weeks ago about building a lava flow with magma blocks and shroom lights.
Yes, I will put that in our stream chat so that we can...
Did you use Blackstone anywhere in that? Because Blackstone would also look like charred stuff. Like, yes. I think you could use Blackstone in the overworld to make it look like the grass had caught fire. You did? Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite remember.
I have a few pieces of Blackstone kind of surrounding the edge of this magma and shroomlight river that I figured it would be fun to make a lava flow looking thing. If you imagine the kind of lava flow that's in Mount Doom at the end of the third Lord of the Rings movie is what I'm aiming for, is something that doesn't necessarily have liquid lava in it and would potentially be a little bit easier for players to get around without maybe landing in the lava and burning themselves and losing their stuff. But I like the combination of materials that I'm using here, and we'll put a screenshot of this in the show notes so that people will be able to see what I'm talking about. So head to thespawnchunks.com to check that out. It's a combination of magma blocks and shroom lights for the lava in the center, but then blackstone around the outside, moving into basalt, like natural basalt after that, and then cobblestone, and then natural stone with dead coral mixed in. And I think that works really well as a color palette for something like this, for a more volcanic biome. And it's something that later on, when I'm getting into build projects in the survival guide, I really plan on implementing a little bit more of that, and having blackstone even mixed in with like a plume of smoke coming in from the top of it would add a really nice solid element to something that you'd otherwise probably build out of glass, just for the transparency of it. I think that'd make a really fun build. So that's probably what I intend to use blackstone and basalt for in the overworld, is much more natural scenery than organized builds that a civilization would have made. I feel like it's going to look a lot better in a more natural environment to me.
Yeah, I agree, and also less grindy than having to make something like that out of obsidian.
Yes, which was the only solution before. Was the only material you could really use. Yeah. So I definitely think that's the way to do it for me.
One of the things that I really like about a new Minecraft update, regardless of the aesthetic of new blocks, is having new projects like updating farms and sorting out what works, what needs working, what needs updating, all that kind of stuff. And I'm really enjoying going through and updating farms and things like that, and looking at what's working and what's not. Having to rethink the way that we have spawn-proofed our Nether hub. We have it mostly spawn-proofed. It just reduces drastically the amount of zombified piglin that we're walking around. But now we've got piglin to worry about, and I've had server mates die because they've been opening chests in the Nether, and there's little holes where piglins can, if they're close enough to you and they can track you, then they can get to you and give you a smack. Because you opened up a chest that you own, which, again, I've said this on stream, I don't like this mechanic. Mm-hmm. I agree with stealing from piglins should make them angry. Fine. If it's a player-placed chest, though, it does not feel good to me as a game mechanic. It's really annoying. However, going through and sorting out, sorry, not sorry for the pun, a piglin bartering system is definitely on my list. I find that really interesting. I like the challenge of moving items around and sorting them without water streams in the Nether. I got my feet wet with that with the fortress farm, which also needs fixing. So, like, I've got a couple of big farm projects. So, one of the things that's nice about another update, or the Nether update, as well as any Minecraft update, is that I no longer am searching for things to do. Like I
Yeah.
have a laundry list of stuff that not only is it good for streams, but it's just good content to just get your head in there and have this thing. And I actually noticed that because of the number of tasks that the gold farm update required, which was mining magma blocks, slabbing the nether with nether bricks, also updating the platforms, removing the netherrack and adding it in, as well as keeping an eye on piglin mechanics and everything else. I would just do one task for about 45 minutes to an hour and then switch, because I would run out of netherrack, or I would run out of nether bricks to place. So then I would go place the magma, and then I would have more netherrack to then smelt, and like it just went back and forth and back and forth. And so that was really really good in that regard. Something that I am not enjoying, however, is mining for ancient debris.
Uh-huh.
I don't care. Fight me. I do.
Yeah.
I don't. Yes, I would love a netherite pick for the extra durability so that I can maybe repair my, like, I don't have to repair my stuff as often. But honestly, with the amount of end game XP farms that we have on the server, I can repair stuff in 5 minutes less. Now that I've spawn proofed a bunch of this nether, this pigman farm, yes, right now it's AFK, but even when it is a player kill farm, I will be able to repair stuff immediately. I would like an extra pair of netherite boots for durability and soul speed to have some fun and play with that. That's it. I'm going to be wearing a gold helmet, elytra, netherite boots, and I guess iron leggings, because that's how I roll. So I don't really have any great desire to go looking for netherite. I tried it for 2 hours. I found none. And I know that there are, I know where to go. Like, I know what to do. I just found it boring. Like, you've been doing a lot of mining for ancient debris. Like, tell me why it's exciting.
It's exciting because I get to blow stuff up a lot. Is the main thing, because I built a super powered mob platform spawner, so I have like 4 of the multi-platform water stream mob spawners going now. So I get more gunpowder in an hour than I know what to do with. Except I now know what to do with it, which is blow up large sections underneath the Nether. And it's also been a bit of fun to do on streams. It's one of those mindless tasks, like building the mountain was, where I can just kind of kick back and talk to my stream chat and not have to worry about focusing on a build and getting quiet and then not feeling like I'm being entertaining. Whereas, put a few explosions on the screen, everyone's entertained. But really, yeah, like I'm beyond the point where I actually need the netherite for anything. Now it's just about proving a point and doing something for the survival guide, where I'm like, look, you can make a beacon out of netherite blocks. You don't need to, but you can. And I've now got to the point where I have enough netherite blocks for a tier 1 beacon and a couple extra. So I've mined over 500 ancient debris now. Do I need to? Heck no. And I would advise that you don't, because as I was saying before all of this actually came to the game, netherite really isn't all it's cracked up to be. It gives you 1 extra point of armor toughness. Nobody really knows what that does. I'm joking. They do, but it's not really all that viable. You get a bit more knockback resistance, which I guess is useful when you're dealing with hoglins. But aside from that, the extra durability and the fact that if you die in lava, your stuff floats now is the only real benefits. And I don't die in lava often enough for that to really make any kind of difference. If I'm going somewhere where I know there is a chance of me going in lava, there's a chance I also have a fire resistance potion, and the most likely place I am going to be when I'm getting in lava in the first place is mining for ancient debris. So I'm already there, So I think, yeah, netherite really isn't all it's cracked up to be. This, like, better than diamond kind of thing is way overblown. The only real reason to do it is because there is another tier, and if you are somebody like yourself who is satisfied with a certain level of gear and doesn't need to have the most powerful thing in order to enjoy the experience, you're not going to need it. It doesn't matter. It's just there for people who want to go that extra step, who want to be like, I am the most OP with my armor, and like, it's nice to have the stuff, because then you've got the best thing. But outside of that, it's almost like a pointless indulgence, it seems like to me. I am more interested in ancient debris for the fact that it is a pushable and blast-proof block that you can use for TNT-based farms than I am in actually having netherite stuff, really.
Right.
I think that the netherite beacon flex thing is very funny, but I think it's actually more fun keeping the ancient debris and doing interesting technical stuff with that. Because
I might even change my tune with the ancient debris in my medieval build when I want it to actually build out of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Know,
That is what
use.
One of the things I really wish I could keep the ancient debris that I'm now turning into netherite blocks is so that I can build like a big rusty ship with it somewhere, because that is one of the things I thought that'd make a really good texture for, is like, you know, barnacles and stuff in a shipyard somewhere and the whole thing is like going to pieces and everything is corroded. I like the look of it for that kind of build, so I kind of want to use some of it for that. I actually, speaking of not being able to find any ancient debris, now that I'm doing this stuff on Bedrock, I found some ancient debris completely by accident when I was mining a tunnel to somewhere else. So it's funny, when you're not looking for it, you stumble upon it, I feel like, more than if you are looking for it, but you don't have any assistance in mining for it. If you're just mining for it yourself using whatever your tools are, then it is more difficult to find than if you're blowing up large chunks of the nether, because you're probably going to get one or maybe even two veins per chunk, but you have to mine for it very systematically in order to make sure you haven't missed it, because it can be one block in a 16 by 16 by 16 area. So that means mining out like however many thousand blocks that is. So
that's why this netherite hall build has come to mind. It's like, well, if I'm gonna take out this netherite hall, that's gonna be, I don't know, 11 by 13 by 96, like it's a huge chunk. Then by clearing that out, especially if it extends into new biomes, then hopefully we'll end up just finding some by pure happenstance. But I want to try, and part of it is also kind of like the design challenge of like, okay, well, what would an efficient branch mine actually look like in the nether? How could we make that look aesthetic? How could we keep track of like where we've been and where we need to go and stuff like that? So and I think too, like starting up at whatever the top level is, I think it's Y22 is the highest it appears.
Roughly, yes.
And then going down from there, right? Like rather than starting at the bottom, you just start at the highest point ish and just start stripping. So I've not mined for diamonds for ages on the Citadel because I did a perimeter underneath my witch farm as a strip mine. I just took everything under the swamp. It's a giant hole. There's nothing there. And so as a result, I found a lot of diamonds and a lot of redstone, a lot of everything else. So that might be the approach that we take in the Nether. And again, will be easier in newer places where we don't have to go 96 blocks or more away from the main northeast southwest corridors to get new blocks, because I had to push the chunk trimming back a bit. So in places like the new developed areas on the server, a nether spawn there will be more likely to have closer ancient debris. But we had another nether related email. Wow, that's hard to say 5 times fast. From Selby A, sorry, regarding lava logging. When I updated my single player world, I had the luck or unluck of finding myself in a basalt delta. I feel you, Selby. A big issue I've had is the overpopulation of magma cubes. I was killed by them. I have really enjoyed the new update though, especially using beds to mine ancient debris. Maybe I'm just going about this all wrong. They killed me too though. So again, maybe not. Maybe I'm on the right side of this. Love the show. Thanks, Selby. P.S. I think lava logging in the Nether should be a thing like water logging in the overworld. Herein lies the reason I really chose this email. So a question to you, sir. Do you think that there was a missed opportunity with an update to how lava works in the Nether update?
I think potentially. I think lava logging could present some interesting possibilities, but there's also really a difference between the way lava and water work, and it comes down to whether or not you can make infinite sources of lava. Because of the fact that you can have an infinite water source, placing a block in a water source doesn't seem like as big of a deal, because, if you place the wrong block in a water source, it's fine. You can create another one. If you place the wrong block in a lava source, you've just deleted that lava source. So I feel like lava logging maybe doesn't make a huge amount of sense from a technical perspective, because it requires you to effectively delete that lava source unless you're placing in the right block to begin with. The way I end up waterlogging a lot of stuff is by I get a bucket of water to start off with, and then I waterlog an entire area, and then I just place the blocks in after that. But then because they are blocks that can be waterlogged, they remain waterlogged. So I feel like,
I think the same could be true for lava. It wouldn't be as useful for things like slabs, because then you have a half a block of death instead of a full block of death, which is not ideal. I do think about it from a technical perspective. That would be kind of cool. Like if you're using it to kill villagers or kill something in a farm, or making something aesthetic. Like I really like the idea of having decorative water in stairs, because it's like a half block trough. It looks really cool that way.
Yeah.
And I think that having a half block of lava would be a really cool way to decorate things in the Nether. I think part of the idea of lava logging, that part of the appeal of water logging is being able to place and see blocks underwater. You can't see anything in lava.
Yes.
Unless you're in it with a fire resist potion.
And even then, you're seeing like an extra block or two in front of your face, but really not that much extra. As somebody who I did a little bit of lava diving recently, both in tunneling under the Nether for ancient debris, and also when I was putting together the basalt generator that moves across the surface of a lava lake, creating a bridge. That's super fun to do. I highly recommend doing that, but you have to chug a lava resistance potion and then a fire resistance potion, and then jump into the lava and take out any blocks that might interact with the slime block flying machine, because that was under the surface as well. And you could probably build it differently than I did, so it would be over the surface instead. But yeah, I had to make sure that it wasn't going to connect to anything, otherwise the slime blocks were going to catch and it would stop one half of it and the other half would keep going. So yeah, I did a little bit of lava diving with fire resistance. The effect is really not all that noticeable, except you can see more than one block in front of you, but you can literally see one extra block in front of you, and that's it. So really not worth lava logging stuff for aesthetic reasons, unless it's on the surface and you want like little rivers of fire. But then you also have to consider, how does that then interact with the player? If it's not a full block, can you still step down into it and burn your feet? Is it like magma blocks where you take like a half point of fire damage each time you stand on the block? It introduces a lot of stuff that, like, that block should be superheated from the fact that there is lava in it now. But then if it's not going to damage the player, that feels like it's inconsistent with the way lava currently works. That
could be interesting from like a mini game perspective, parkour, where things are like the floor is lava or the floor is almost lava, like it's like too hot to stand here for very long. Hope your timing is right, because otherwise you're back to the start.
It would definitely be kind of interesting to have inverted stairs in a floor, so that you didn't know which blocks were heated and which ones weren't.
Oh yeah, that would be kind of cool.
It's kind of like that trick where you hide magma blocks under carpet and people wonder why they're suddenly taking damage when they step on the carpet.
What about like, we've got gilded blackstone in the game, where gold is in the blackstone, right? Like that's one of the new blocks.
Yes.
What about not gilded, but I guess blocks that could be imbued with lava? I guess that's essentially what magma blocks are. Yeah. I was thinking that it would be nice if you had a different texture, where if you, instead of water logging the block, if you lava logged, quote unquote, the block, it would then take on the properties of magma, but maybe give you a different texture.
Sort of magmatic blackstone or something like that. Yeah, I can see that working out. I'm coming around to the idea. Not that I was super against it to begin with, but yeah, I tend to maybe take a devil's advocate kind of perspective and wonder why they haven't implemented that stuff in the first place.
Yeah. It's a fun idea, Selby. Thanks for the email.
Definitely. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this Bedrock challenge that I've been doing, just briefly while we wrap up the show here. I think the Nether survival challenge is definitely worth doing, and in fact, I would almost go so far as to say that this is the intended experience for this update, is the early game look at the Nether. Because the whole point of the Nether update was making the Nether feel like a place where you could do the survival game. You have access to wood, stone, iron, gold, diamond, and now netherite all in the same dimension. You can do the tool progression without ever having to go to the overworld. There are better sources of food. There are things you can trade with. It feels like a much more complete experience, especially when you're in the early game. I feel like the problem people are having with things feeling overpowered is, more often than not, they are at end game already, and it comes naturally to them to want to progress all of the new mechanics to the extent where they've already got everything in the overworld. Already got some super powerful mob farms in the overworld, make a super powerful mob farm in the Nether to keep up with the stuff that you're already doing in the overworld. You skip over the early game experience of trying to scrounge what you can from the Nether without having elytra or anything like that. And I feel like folks like Hermitcraft who have set up their server in 1.15.2 and then upgraded to 1.16 are going to have a completely different experience when they start up their next season of Hermitcraft, and then they have to go through the current Nether to get to all of the stuff that's required for progression, blaze rods and stuff like that. Finding a Nether fortress when you don't have the ability to fly around is a very different experience now. So I feel like the Nether Survival Challenge has taught me something about bartering, and that it feels properly balanced when you're scrounging gold from your environment and hand-delivering it to the piglins instead of farming it en masse and automating it with redstone. It's balanced for the early game, but not for the late game, kind of like I said earlier. And people have also suggested, as far as balancing bartering going, introducing a bartering GUI, because of that being the reason that you can't necessarily trade OP levels with villagers, being because you don't just throw emeralds on the ground for them and they chuck stuff back at you. There has to be individual interactions. It slows the whole process down. But for me, something like that, the GUI is kind of implying that you have a dialogue with that villager. You have a shared language and they are offering you a trade verbally. It's an in-game way of expressing it in a game that doesn't have any actual dialogue. And the piglins aren't meant to be that, right? The piglins are meant to be a primitive civilization. They just grunt at you and throw stuff on the ground. I feel like adding a GUI removes something of their character, the kind of flavor that you have of the piglins, and just makes them too much similar to villagers, which I think kind of ruins the point. But the vibe of the Nether is so much easier to get, and it's so much easier to feel scared by the Nether when you are entering it for the first time. I think you had this experience yourself of like, oh, no, I've spawned in a soul sand valley and the nearest thing is a basalt delta. I'm clearly going to die, Like
No, it was a soul sand valley the size of Canada and a basalt delta donut.
Exactly,
it was rough.
The sense of foreboding that you now get when you enter the Nether, combined with the the ambient sound and all of the stuff that we have definitely praised on this show in previous episodes, really adds to the experience now. But going through the tool progression really gives you a better sense of what was intended for this update, because suddenly you're really happy that you can get wood in the Nether, not necessarily to build houses out of and to use as a resource in that sense and to farm loads of that so that you can trade it with your server mates, but you're really happy that you have something that you can use as a light source when you can't make torches, because you can get shroom lights from these things, and you're really happy to actually have something you can make a wooden pickaxe out of if you start in the Nether with nothing. And so I feel like the Nether survival experience is really something people need to give it a go. There are commands that you can use to teleport yourself directly into the Nether when you start in a Java Edition world. I'm sure somebody will make a data pack at some point, if they haven't made one already, that will start you off in the Nether, or a game rule that they can implement or something like that will allow you to start off that way. But it's as simple as executing a teleport command that teleports you into the Nether. There are very easy ways of doing that. But this Nether Spawn add-on that I'm using basically does that for you in Bedrock Edition, which is pretty cool. Having Blackstone have a new purpose because of needing it for tools definitely, I think, softens the idea for me of like, well, this is an aesthetic block I'm not going to do very much with, because suddenly it has a purpose again if you're using it in the early game to make stone tools. Unfortunately, by most people's time entering the Nether for the first time, unless you immediately made a bucket out of the first iron that you found in the overworld and started to make a Nether portal using the bucket method, you're probably going to have better than stone tools anyway, and you probably won't need to craft more stone tools while you're in the Nether. But if you're one of those people who likes to enter the Nether in the really early game, that seems like a worthwhile proposition to have the access to those tools. And if you're planning on starting a Nether survival base where you set a respawn anchor and you basically live in the Nether, then you might need to restart your tool progression somewhere. It might be worth doing. I personally really like the dynamic of the Nether when you look at it from a purely survival perspective now. And it's something that's been hidden from me by having a 2-year-old survival world that I brought forward into the Nether update at this point. So starting fresh and starting in the Nether has really given me a different perspective on this update that is worth looking at. I really think it is. I think that's part of what they wanted to do with this update to begin with, and I would not be surprised if you saw more people doing like a Nether survival series on YouTube, or just trying, starting out in the Nether and seeing how easy it is to survive for the first place. I've also discovered a couple of things about this update that I didn't know, like you cannot turn warped and crimson stems into charcoal because the wood doesn't burn. And so that was an interesting prospect at first, because I was like, I can't make torches. What do I do? And it's not like you need to light up too much about the Nether anyway, but my first light sources were shroom lights because I couldn't craft torches until I had some means of making coal, which is an interesting proposition. Now, you can make soul campfires because you need 3 sticks, 3 logs, and some soul sand or soul soil, which you can get quite easily. And the piglins will throw that at you if you barter them, but it's still... Yeah, it is kind of interesting. You have to start thinking about, if I want coal, I'm going to have to go and kill some wither skeletons. And you think, well, that's stopping me from making torches now. And so you have to completely rewire your brain to exist with the materials that you can get in the Nether instead of the ones you can get in the overworld.
Right. Because you still have fuel, because the hyphae turns into wood, so you can get sticks and you can burn the wood, but you can't burn the logs, like the hyphae logs, right?
Yes, I'm fairly certain that's the way it works. But you cannot turn those into charcoal to begin with. Also, if you make a soul campfire, you can use that to cook food. So you can cook pork chops on that if you kill some hoglins. But then killing hoglins is kind of difficult because you can't craft a shield without bartering with piglins to get iron. And the whole thing just becomes a very different experience. Like, I have just had to raid a bastion to get iron, because the piglins...
My next question was, like, have you raided anything? Yeah,
I raided a bastion. The cool thing about bastions, thankfully, is that you'll find iron in the chests there, and you have to block off the entire room around you so that when you open the chest, the piglins don't get in. But the majority of the time, they calm down after about 15 seconds anyway, and if you block off the room entirely and they don't have line of sight to you, opening a chest is not a problem. Breaking the chest is a problem, but opening it is not, from what I can tell. So again, I'm learning that side of things, where previously I would just drain the entire thing with a hopper. Can't make a hopper without iron. And I'm having to defend myself with stone tools and leather armor that I bartered from these piglins. The first thing I did was make a set of gold boots, because I was not going to be fighting every piglin that I saw. But again, having to have gold as a necessary armor item is a really interesting dynamic that this update brings.
And to remind people, gold has the highest enchantment probability on, if you get to the point where you actually have an enchantment table, you get better enchants on gold armor than you do anything else.
Here is a fun thing that I realized that unfortunately was my hopes were dashed, but if you traded enough soul speed books from piglins and had a grindstone to disenchant them, you can make a bookshelf and therefore an enchanting setup without the need to farm sugarcane, which you can't do in the Nether because there's no water and no access to sugarcane. Unfortunately, you can't make a grindstone without access to stone, and that is the bottleneck, because unfortunately you don't have access to stone in the Nether, and black stone cannot be used to make a grindstone. You need a natural stone slab to make a grindstone. So I'm really hoping that they add in much the same way that you can make a brewing stand out of blackstone. I kind of want them to be able to make a grindstone out of a blackstone slab as well, or maybe like a polished blackstone slab.
Add an extra crafting step or something to it. But yeah, basically replacing anything in the overworld that you used cobble or stone for, and have it be either blackstone or polished blackstone. That would make sense. Yes. Given the track record that they have with blackstone being used for tools and stuff like that.
Yeah, but because then I could stay in the Nether and have fully enchanted gear as well. Whereas right now I think the only enchantment I have is because a piglin gave me some soul speed iron boots. But then again, yeah, there's so many little details about this. It's almost like playing modded Minecraft again, where you have to kind of rewire your brain as for what the next steps are, what the next set of materials is. It's like playing Sky Factory, where suddenly you have to go through several different steps just to get dirt. You know, there's like
Mhm.
there's a lot of different challenges present here that I think are really interesting and new. And
I
it
like that idea better than grinding in the overworld like I did to go into the Nether to find it just stops you, and then you have to go back to grinding in the overworld, which is not new content. Like it's just like, oh, so it's forcing me to do more stuff that I've already done. Whereas this sounds like it's a much more fresh experience.
Yeah, I recommend it. I honestly do. Anybody who is trying it at home, definitely email the show. Let us know what your experience was, because I would love to hear from more people who are giving this a try. And if you're interested, of course, I've got the series on my channel right now. It's going to be going all week. I'm aiming for every day of the week I upgrade my tools. So I started off with nothing, ended up getting wood by the end of the episode. I got it basically early in the episode, but I ended the episode with wood tools. The next episode I get stone. After that, I'm aiming for iron. After that, I'm going to try and find diamond. And I think diamond is going to be a case of raiding bastions and nether fortresses and hoping I get lucky with loot chests. But then from there, of course, I can upgrade my diamond gear into netherite. And only when I get netherite stuff am I going to be able to build myself a nether portal and get home. Of course, if you trade with piglins, they will give you obsidian and fire charges, so enough piglin bartering you can get yourself home with nothing but a wooden pickaxe, because you can still mine nether gold ore with a wooden pickaxe. But I think it's kind of fun to stick around in the nether and see if you can go through the entire stages of tools until you're able to get home. Worth a try anyway. And if you, like I said, if people at home want to give that a try, email the show and let us know how it went. I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for today, though. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you get some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in by visiting patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You can join our community of 190 patrons, and pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where you can now listen in to the show as it is recorded live. We've had a big increase in patrons from last week, as Joel mentioned at the top of the show. Big thanks to everyone who's hopped on board, and special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Cameron Sigelski, Greener Canuck, JD Williamson, Yakov Nastin, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's 100% free to just tell friends about the Spawn Chunks and where they can listen. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the Spawn Chunks. Personal recommendations are by far the best way, of course, to tell your friends about the Spawn Chunks. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. Basically wherever you can find a podcast. Leave us a star rating on the Apple Podcast app. It's one of the other ways that you can support the show. It's free to do that as well. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page, where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I attempt to make sense of this crazy and wonderful game in a series called the Minecraft Survival Guide. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the Survival Guide, mostly gathering ancient debris these days, and I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online is at joelduggan.com. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on most social media. The Citadel Cafe is my podcast all about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can look for my chat with Brock at Vola later on this week. And you can follow me at twitch.tv/Joel Duggan, where I'm going to be playing Minecraft and Satisfactory and Borderlands 3 and Minecraft again. You'll get the idea. See you then.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but it looks small from the right angles.